Today is the last day of Hanukkah. That's it. We lit all the candles last night, and we're getting ready to transition back into regular life. Today is a very special day. It's called Zois Hanukkah in the literature, because of the Torah reading, Zois Chanukah HaMizbeach. But it's also very spiritually potent. Many Hasidic Rebbes treat this day as a very, very high day. The Rebbe himself held farbrengens on this day, children's rallies. It's very auspicious for shidduchim. If anyone we know needs a shidduch, we should pray for them today. They should be blessed. Any blessings that we need. And if the whole Hanukkah was wonderful for learning Torah, because the whole theme of Hanukkah is Lahashkicham Teirasecha, as I keep mentioning each day, the Greeks wanted us to forget the Torah, not to be involved in Torah, not to acknowledge the godliness in the Torah. So no better day than the day of the culmination, when it all comes to a head, the last day, to be studying Rambam. And we get a new set of laws. Be'ezras Hashem, with Hashem's help, like I always say, we're beginning today a new set of laws. Hilchos, Tumas, Tzaraas, the laws of impurity imparted by Tzaraas. Now, what is Tzaraas? It's a very important word to define. That's our topic for the next 2 weeks. Tzaraas is the name of a spiritual disease. In the end of the set of laws that Rambam tells us, it's not a physical, medical condition. Nothing scientific about this. This is a spiritual malady that came in response to certain negative behaviors that Jews would do, which the Rambam enumerates at the end of the set of laws. And if it appeared either on the person's skin, on clothing, or on the homes, we'll deal with all three types in the set of laws. First skin, then clothing, then homes. If it appeared and it met the criteria, then the person or the clothing or the home became impure. And that's really what we're after. I mean, we're in the Rambam's book of ritual purity and impurity. And at the end of the day, we always want to know whether something qualifies as impure or not. And if it does, what level is its impurity? What do we do with it? How does it affect other things? But like when it came to the corpse, before you get to how a corpse transmits impurity, you have to know which entities of the corpse qualify as a corpse to make you impure. Same thing with Tzaraas. We're going to get a whole host of chapters to define what is called the halachically significant lesion. By the way, the Hebrew term for lesion is nega. So another important word to learn. Tzaraas is the disease, nega is the lesion. So we have to know what qualifies as a nega. What makes a lesion impure? And there's a special law with Tzaraas, by the way, that only a Kohen can decide if it's pure or impure. Torah keeps repeating. The person came to the Kohen would inspect it, and he would say, pure or impure. The Rabbi has a whole talk on that, and we'll discuss it later when we get to the laws dealing with the Kohen. But the Kohen has to know if something is a qualifying lesion or not. How do you know if it's a qualifying lesion or not? So that's going to be the whole first chapters in this set of laws, but just as a basic form of introduction, let me just say this. Every nega has two parts. There's the nega itself. The lesion itself has to be qualifying. That's typically related to the color. The color, in order to qualify as a lesion, it has to be a certain color. And then, even once you establish that a nega is a nega, it has the right coloring, there also has to be what's called a siman tuma. Siman tuma means a sign of impurity within the lesion. Something has to happen within the lesion that now makes it impure. When it comes to the skin, I'll just give you this, even though we're going to deal with it in detail. When it comes to the skin Tzaraas, there are three types of signs that make it impure. First of all, in order to be a nega, it has to be white, or the proper shade of white, which we'll define in the first chapter. And then, the lesion itself has to have either what's called seyar lavan, white hair, 2 white hairs have to be formed inside the lesion, or michya. Michya means a healthy blotch of skin has to appear within the lesion, or pisyon. Pisyon means spreading. The lesion has to have spread from its original size. So if you first have a qualifying lesion and then one of those three things happen, now it's impure. What happens if you have a lesion without the signs of impurity? So there's a very special law in Tzaraas that's called hesger, quarantine. The Kohen would examine the lesion and he would say, hey, this is a good lesion, the nega meets the criteria, but I don't see any signs of impurity. Therefore, you have to go into quarantine for a week. After a week, you'd come back for reinspection, and the Kohen would check. If one of the signs came, you'd be declared impure. If still no signs came, then you went in for another week of quarantine. When it comes to human skin Tzaraas, there could be up to 2 weeks of quarantine. After the second week, it's either pure or impure. If none of the signs came, you're just declared pure, even though you have a lesion, a white spot on your body. But if a sign came, then you'd be declared impure. And again, there are many more details to this. The point I'm just saying is that we want to always remember that there's two parts to the nega. There's the nega itself, and then there's the siman tuma. And it's the siman tuma which makes the nega impure. Once it's decided that a person is impure, Now there's a whole level of impurity that applies to him, different behaviors he has to adopt, different things he'll transmit his impurity in different ways, and there's a whole procedure of how to become pure from tzaraas as well, which is all going to be the subject towards the middle of these laws, and then we'll deal with tzaraas of clothing and tzaraas of homes, where it's also similar things. Qualifying lesion, sign of impurity, what to do once you're impure, and how to get purified. Okay, so knowing all that, let's head into it. As the Rambam always does, he gives us the list of mitzvahs that we deal with in this set of laws. Yesh bichlalan shmeina mitzvahs. In this set of laws, we're going to be dealing with 8 of the 613 mitzvahs. Sheish mitzvahs aseh, ushtayim mitzvahs leis aseh. 6 are positive mitzvahs, 2 are negative mitzvahs. V'zehu pratam. These are their details. Aleph. Number 1, lehoires b'tzaraas adam. The Kohen, or a Torah sage, as we'll see, has to rule the law of tzaraas on the human. Kedino hakasav b'Torah, like the law stated in the Torah. Beis shelo yakait simani tuma. It's forbidden to cut off the signs of impurity once they appear on a lesion, or the lesion itself. Gimel shelo yegaleach hanesek. It's forbidden to shave a nesek. A nesek is a term for a lesion that creates a bald spot in the hair of the head or the hair of the beard, which we'll deal with also as a separate chapter in this set of laws. You aren't allowed to shave down the hair around it because now you don't know where the lesion is. Dalid, number 4, sheyiyah ha-mitzoyra mefursam. When somebody becomes a mitzoyra, that means a person inflicted with tzaraas, he needs to become publicized. Everyone has to know who he is. Bikriyas begadav, and you achieve this by tearing his clothes. Upriyas reishay, letting his hair grow long. Va'atiya al safam, and wrapping himself, cloaking himself up to the mustache. He needs to have a covering over his eyes almost, and from the bottom of his mouth as well, till the mustache area. That was a part of the mitzvah's conduct, which again we'll learn about later. Hey, 5th mitzvah, taras tzaraas, the procedure that must be followed to become pure from tzaraas. Vav, number 6, sheyigaleach ha-mitzvah as kol sarei kishayitar. When the mitzvah goes through the purification process, part of that is he must shave all of his hair, everything, full body shave. Zayin, din tzaraas ha-beged, the laws that pertain to tzaraas on clothing. Ches, din tzaraas ha-bayis, the laws that pertain to tzaraas on homes. Ubir mitzvahs elu biprakim elu. The explanation of these mitzvahs is coming in the next 16 chapters, God willing. Perek Risha in chapter 1. Halacha Aleph. Tzaraas oir habasar. We begin with tzaraas of the skin. What is tzaraas of the skin? Hu sheyalbin makoim min ha'or. It means that an area in the skin became white. And it has to be a specific type of white. V'tiya halavnunis. The whiteness needs to be kikrum beitza, either like the whiteness of an egg membrane, umikrum beitza olamayla, and anything whiter than that. Aval avnunis shehideha mikruma beitza olamata. But if it's a whiteness which is darker than the whiteness of an egg membrane or anything darker than that, eino tzaraas, it's not the tzaraas lesion spoken about in the Torah, elo boyhakhu, it is simply pigmentation. People have vitiligo, different diseases of whiteness on their skin. That's not the tzaraas. The spiritual tzaraas has to be a whiteness, egg membrane level, and up. Halacha beis, if we speak specifically, the arba maris yesh b'tzaraas oir habasar. There are 4 possible appearances, 4 possible shades of whiteness that the tzaraas of the skin can take on. The eluhain, and they are the following. Loiven az b'yoser she'en lamayla mimenu. The strongest white, of which there is nothing whiter than it, shehunira ba'ir habasar kasheleg, which when it's on the skin, it appears like the appearance of snow. Hu hanikra baheres. That's called in the Torah baheres. Remember this term? Throughout the Rambam, the word baheres is going to become the default name for any lesion. It's going to be synonymous with nega. But in terms of the specifics, baheres is actually the name of one of the shades of white for a qualifying lesion, white as snow. The levin shehu deya mizemaat. Then if you have a whiteness, a little darker than that, shenira kitzemer noki shel keves ben yoimai, with the appearance of clean wool of a newborn sheep, a sheep that's just born, and you take the wool and it's beautifully pristine white, hu hanikra se'es. That's called se'es. When Torah talks about se'es, it is referring to a whiteness, the shade of clean newborn's wool. The leiven shadeya minas eismat. Then you have a whiteness a little bit darker than that. Shanira kisid ha'hechal. It appeared like the plaster that was used to paint the heichal, the main structure in the temple premises. Who told the sabaheres? That's called the child, the derivative of the baheres, the nikras sapachas, it's also called sapachas, which means subservient, secondary, sapachas habaheres, that's the shade of plaster. And then you have the leivin shadeya misida hechol na'at, a whiteness even darker than the plaster of the hechol, v'areo kikrum beitza, which is the lowest level, egg membrane white. He told us hase'es, that is a derivative of the se'es. V'gam zeh nikra sapachas, it's also called sapachas, secondary to the se'es. Hini lamadata, behold, you've learned, shahamare shu kesida hechol, hu sapachas habaheres. The appearance which has the whiteness of the plaster of the hechol is the secondary to the baheres. V'hamare shu kikrum beitza, and the appearance which is like the egg membrane, hi sapachas hase'es, that is the secondary to the se'es. She'en l'shein sapachas ala tefela, because the word sapachas means secondary. Mikan amru, from here came the sages' summary. They said, Maresh negoyim shtayim shehin arba. The qualifying appearances of negoyim, of negas, of lesions, are two, which are really four. Baheres v'sapachta, se'es v'sapachta. We have two categories, baheres and se'es, and each one has a secondary subservient category. Baheres and its sapachas, se'es and its sapachas. Snow, wool, plaster, and egg membrane. Anything darker than that, again, is completely pure, not a lesion. Halacha gimel, arba mares negoyim elu. Any four of these shades of qualifying lesions, kulan mitzdarfin zeim zeh, they all combine with one another. In other words, if a person has a lesion made up of two different shades of white, if there are any of these shades, they combine to be considered one lesion. Bein lehakel, whether that leads to a leniency, as we'll soon see, or I should say later we'll see, that if a person has a lesion on his skin, and then the whiteness spreads to the entire body, that actually makes you pure. So what if the original lesion and then the spreading to the entire body were two different shades? Well, if there are two of these shades, they combine, they're all considered to be one lesion. The person is considered to be fully covered in Tzaraas. That's a leniency. It means you're pure. Bein lahachmer, whether we're talking about leading to astringency. A person has a regular lesion size. Half of it looks like snow. Half of it looks like wool. That's a qualifying lesion. If there's no siman tuma, if there's no sign, the Kohen can put him into quarantine for that. If they wouldn't combine, you basically have two half lesions. You don't even go to quarantine for that. But because they combine, they lead to astringency and force you into quarantine. Bein bitchilas re'iyas hanega, this combination is effective, whether it is at the beginning point, when the Kohen first examines the nega. Bein b'soif hashiva, whether it's after a week of quarantine. Bein la'achar sheniftar ha'metzora, or it's after 2 weeks of quarantine, at which point the metzora might be sent away. If he has a lesion and there's nothing growing in it, he'll just be exempted. Oy nechlat, or maybe it's after he'll have been decided to be impure. At any point in the metzora's process, if putting together two shades of whiteness is going to lead to a leniency or astringency, we apply it. Keita, what's an example of this? Echad nega shaya kule lavan keshelik. Let's say you have a nega, a lesion that was fully white like snow. Like kesida hechol, or like the plaster of the hechol. Like ketzemarnake kekrum beitza, or like the clean wool, or like the white egg membrane. The echad nega, or whether it's a lesion, shahaya miktsas haleiven kemare habaheres, umiktsase kemare haseis, umiktsase kemare hasapachas. Let's say you have a lesion with three parts. One part of it is like the baheres, snow. One part of it is like the seis, like wool. A third part of it is like a sapachas, one of the derivatives. Hakol kemare echad uchashuv. Bottom line, it's basically all like one color. Any of the four colors lead to making the lesion qualifying as a lesion. In kain, if so, lama menom chachamim. Why did the sages count them as different? When you count the number, it makes it sound like there's different categories. So why did they count them? V'amru, and they said, Maresh negayim shtayim shein arba. The appearances of negayim are two that are four. Kedei lahavin b'mares. To be able to have people, the Kohen, who's going to rule on the Tzaraas, he has to be able to understand the different appearances. When a Kohen checks a person's nega, a person brings a lesion and the Kohen is inspecting it, he needs to be able to label which shades are which. Shekol kohen she'enei makir hamares u'shmeisein. Any Kohen who doesn't instantly recognize the appearances and their names, when they teach him, when they give him the information about the negayim, lo yira hanega. He's not authorized to check negayim. Ad sheyavin v'yakir v'yomer, till he can understand and recognize and say, Zui baheres v'zui sapachta, zui se'es v'zui sapachta. This is the baheres, this is the derivative, that's the se'es, that's the derivative. He has to be able to know. By the way, the commentaries say he has to know not only the shades of human skin lesions. He has to also know the shades that apply to the home lesions and the clothes lesions that are also different color. They're like red and green, as we'll see later. He has to know all the different shades for all the different types of negayim in order to rule on any nega. And that's why the sages saw it important to divide it into different categories to facilitate this possibility of him knowing the different shades, which then allows him to actually check the negayim. Halacha Dalet, says the Rambam, while it's true that the primary shades of Tzaraas are pure white at any of these 4 levels, the Torah also makes a reference to a white reddish lesion. Let's say you have one of the shades of these whites, but inside the shade is miktsas admumius me'ureves boy, a little redness mixed into it. Gamze nega tzarasu. That's also a qualifying lesion of Tzaraas. Shenemar, because the Torah says, Oy vaheres levana adam domes. Sometimes there could be a white baheres, a white spot that's reddish. V'hu hadin laseis v'lasapachas shel seis u'lasapachas habaheres. And even though Torah only says this by the baheres, it's true of all 4 shades. The seis, the derivative of the seis, the derivative of the baheres, they could all have a reddish spot. The hamare hazeh. And when you have this shade, shehu mu'urav milavnunis u'ma'at oidem, mixed from a little bit of white, from mostly white and a little bit of red, hu hanikra pasuch. That's called pasuch. Pasuch means mixed. Whenever you hear the word pasuch, it means a mixture of a white shade and a reddish tinge. Now, once it's too red, it's no longer a white lesion with reddish tinge. So we have to know how red can this Tzaraas lesion be to qualify as a tinge in the whiteness, not as a reddish lesion, which is then totally okay. The Ketzad Mare HaPasuch Ba'arba Mares Elu. What exactly is the level of mixture of redness in these 4 shades? So the Rambam says, very interesting way to measure it, Ki'ilu hein arba koises maleyes chalav. Take, for example, 4 cups filled with milk. V'nisarev ba'kois harishayna shnei tipei dam. Imagine you would mix into the first cup 2 drops of blood. Ubashniya arba'a tipin. In the second cup you would mix 4 drops of blood. Ubashlishis shmeina tipin. In the third cup you would mix 8 drops of blood. Ubarevi is shisha asar tipin. And in the fourth cup you would mix 16 drops of blood. So then, taking these 4 cups, you would compare them to the 4 shades of white. Hapasuch sheba baheres, a mixed tinge for a baheres lesion, hu hamare haravi, can go up to the 4th appearance. In other words, because the baheres is so white, even if you were to drop 16 drops of blood into the milk, it would still be considered only a reddish tinge in the white. Past that is too red. The hapasuch sheba se'es kemare koishlishis. For the se'es, it would have to look like maximum the 3rd cup, like 8 drops of blood mixed into milk. If it's more red than that on the backdrop of a se'es, it's too red. The hapasuch shebesapachas habaheres, the mix in the derivative of the baheres, kemare akois hashniya, is the appearance of the 2nd cup, like 4 drops of blood mixed into the milk, because anyways, the whiteness is not so strong. So once there's too much red, it's already out of the white realm. The hapasuch shebesapachas hase'es kemare akois harishayna. The pasuch in the mixture of the lowest level, the derivative of the se'es, is just like the first cup, 2 drops of blood. Any more than that, it's too red. That's one approach. In the commentaries, how to explain this last part of the halacha about pasuch. Others say it goes the opposite, that when it's a white, when it's baheres, in order to qualify as reddish, it has to be at least 16 drops of blood. If it's anything less, then it isn't even pasuch. It's just baheres. It's not reddish tinge enough. Whereas the other ones required less red, progressively less red. See the commentaries on that. Halacha hey. Kol hamare sa'elu. All of these appearances, now we have 8 shades really. We have 4 qualifying shades of white with 4 reddish tinged white. So all of these appearances, bein halavan, bein hapasuch, whether it's white or mixed, mitarfin zeim zeh, u'kamare echad in chashuvin. They also all combine with each other. They're all considered to be one shade. Ubein shahaya hanega kule lavan, whether the lesion was fully white, a miktsase lavan, or miktsase adamdam, or partially white and partially red, and the commentaries even add over here, even if it was partially 2 different types of white and partially red. Hakal kamare echad hu. It's all considered to be one appearance, one lesion, bein lahakil, bein lahachmer, whether this leads to a leniency or to a stringency, it doesn't make a difference. They're always mitzdaref, they're always combining. Halacha vav, a general rule when it comes to Tzaraas lesions. Kol mare tzaraas oir habasar. All appearances of tzaraas on the skin of the flesh, eina kruya nega, v'loi mitama, is not even called a nega, not even called a lesion. And it certainly doesn't communicate impurity ad sheyiyeh mare hanega amlik me'oir habasar, until the appearance of the nega looks deeper than the skin of the flesh. Now we don't mean factually deeper, not deeper to the touch, rather to the look. Like you have when you walk on the street and you see a shadow. The shadow always looks taller, raised more than the sun. The sun looks deeper embedded than the shade does. So when you look at, here's the actual vitiligo, not Tzaraas, but that's always how it looks. The white looks like it's lower down than the skin. That is when it qualifies as a lesion. But if the appearance of the whiteness or the mixed tinge was looking equal to the rest of the skin, or taller, more raised than the skin, that's not a nega, even if it has all the proper shades and everything. It's simply a rash that erupted on the body. It's just a pigmentation. It's nothing in terms of impurity. Halacha Zayin, another very important rule to know. Shiur kol nigei tzaraas, the amount, the minimum size of every tzaraas lesion. Bein tzaraas adam, bein tzaraas begadim, whether it's tzaraas of humans or tzaraas of clothing. Ki gris hakilki, we measure it based on the Cilician bean. There was a bean that grew in this area of Cilicia in Turkey, kilki, and the beans that they grew there was a little bit big, and the size of that bean, shehu meruba, squared. Beans are obviously not fully squared, but you take the volume of the beans area and you put it into a square. If you want the equivalent on the skin, it's a square area on the skin, the area where 36 hairs can grow, literally a square, 6 hairs length, 6 hairs width. We're talking about arm hair, or body hair as the commentators say, not head hair. That's much, much closer together. These are more separate. Any less than that is not a tzaraas lesion. Typically, the accepted approach is that a gris is the size of an American dime. Gris is relevant also to the laws of impurity of a nida, a woman who spots blood on her clothing. If it's the size of a gris, then it's a problem. So they converted it to a dime. Here, it's more of a square size, a square area of 36 hairs. And then Rambam clarifies, halacha ches, nega shahaya rachbay kedei tzmichas chamesh sayres. If you had an elongated nega, the width of it was the area of 5 hairs growth. Afilu haya arkay ama, even if it's linked with a full cubit, tons of hairs, hadis atar, it's all pure. The ene nega tzaraas, it's not considered a tzaraas lesion, ad sheyeh ribua or ravua kigris. It has to be a gris in a square, 6 by 6. No other dimensions. Fully 6 by 6. That Rambam repeats, a very famous law. All the sizes stated by Chazal came directly from Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai. This is an olive-sized portion, it's an egg-sized portion, this gris, it's all halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Halacha tes, says the Rambam, just going forward, a general rule. Kol makom shenoimar baheres. Wherever we will use in this set of laws the word baheres, hu hadin l'shara arba maris shalevan eshal pasuch. It's a general term. We're using it as a default term, but it really includes all the other appearances of white and all the appearances of mixed reddish tinges. And also automatically when we say the word baheres, we're assuming that it means gris size or more, the amleg ma'ir basar, and it's deeper than the skin. In other words, when we use the word baheres in these halachas, we're always going to be referring to a spot that meets all the criteria necessary to be a qualifying lesion. That's what we call baheres with no further definition. The word baheres means a spot that meets all the criteria. Now another very important rule, more for the Kohen, checking the Tzaraas, he says like this, baheres shehi azar kashaleg, when you have a baheres that's actually as deep white as snow, niris ba'adam shehu lavan keha. If the person is more of a whitish complexion, lighter skin tone, so the snow white spot will actually look darker. Ubaheres shehi keha niris bekushiaza. Whereas if you have a darker spot of white, on a black or dark-skinned person, it'll actually appear to be a deeper white. And you might mistake the level of a nega because of the contrast to the rest of the skin. Lefikach, therefore, ein mishari nakel ela bebeinani. When the sages said, baheres is like snow, and this is like wool, we're all referring to an average complexion person. She'enei loy lavan v'loy shachar, who isn't too albino, too white, nor too black. Halacha Yud, now that Rambam sets the stage for what's coming. And this is a point that I made in the introduction. Everything we've said till now is to qualify as a nega, to qualify as a lesion. But then for the lesion to become impure, you have to have a siman tuma. There has to be a sign of impurity in it. Shleisha simone tuma hin b'Tzaraas eira basar. There are 3 types of signs of impurity when it comes to the skin Tzaraas. Seyar lavan, white hairs appearing in it. Here there's only 1, but actually it's going to be 2, as we'll see tomorrow. 2 white hairs have to grow in the lesion. The hamichya, a blotch of healthy skin inside the lesion. The hapisya, or the lesion spreads. Ushlashtan mefurashin b'Torah, and all 3 are clear in the Torah that they become a sign of impurity. And now that Rambam is just going to, in very short, walk us through a procedure of somebody who had a Tzaraas and wants to know if it's a qualifying lesion. Ketzad, what does this look like? And this looks like a complicated chart, but it's not really. And if the text is not so clear, I apologize in advance. I had to make everything on 1 page. So maybe the next time I do a chart, I'll spread it into 2 slides so we can see it more clear. Okay? But it begins over here. Misha nolda by baheres, a person has a baheres. Okay, now, and when we say baheres, so right away, if it's dark white, it's automatically tar, it's automatically pure. But let's say it's one of the qualifying whites. It's wool white, it's egg membrane white, it's snow white, it's lime or plaster white. Okay? He comes to the kohen. If they're right away, uba seyar lavan, ay michyas basar chai, if there's white hair or healthy flesh inside the lesion, when the kohen sees that, right away he's going to make what's called hechlet. Hechlet means decided. That's it. He becomes impure. He'll say he's impure. Right? So the kohen will right away ask, are there white hairs? If yes, he's impure. Are there healthy flesh? If yes, then he's impure. Now obviously you can't, at this point you can't have spreading, because the lesion is only coming to be there the first time. Spreading can only be after a week of quarantine. So if there's no white hairs or no healthy flesh, no white hairs, no healthy flesh, yisager shivas yamin. Now you put him into quarantine. Quarantine for 7 days. And now at this point, any of the 3 appearances, any of the 3 signs can come. On the 7th day, the kohen checks him out. If there appeared on the baheres a white hair or a blotch of healthy skin, or at this point they could also ask if it spread. White hairs, healthy flesh, spread. If the answer to any of these is yes, then he's tameh. He is completely decided to be impure. Now, by the way, doesn't say it right here, he's going to say it in a minute. If it became fully dark, if the lesion itself darkened to a point where it isn't even egg membrane white, then he'll become pure over here. But if the answer to all these questions is no, it literally stayed as is, there was no healthy skin, no white hairs, no spreading, Yasgir Shavua Sheni, 2nd week of quarantine. Again, the kohen asks, white hairs, healthy flesh, did it spread? If any of these things happen, then he's impure, totally. If not, automatically right here, he is completely pure and he's let go. There's no more than 2 weeks quarantine when it comes to skin Tzaraas. If 2 weeks pass and there's no change in the lesion, you're good. Now, doesn't mean you're good forever. You still have the lesion. If after the kohen released him and he goes to be pure, if one of the signs come back, it spreads, or a white hair grows, or a healthy blotch appears, muchlat tuma, or muchlat lituma. He's definitely goes back to being impure. The point is you don't have to go to quarantine again. We'll just send you home. But if a sign appears later, you definitely are in trouble, and it's Tzaraas. Halacha Yud Aleph. Here the Rambam mentions the point about darker. Baheres shahisa azar kesheleg. Let's say a baheres began in the deepest white, snow white. Ula'achar ahesger nasis kikrum beitza. And after the quarantine, it gets darker, but it's still in one of the realm of qualifying whites. It's still egg membrane white. Or it was egg membrane white and it got deeper, like snow white. As long as it's in the realm of the 4 qualifying shades, it is treated as is. Because the deepening of a shade is not a sign of impurity, nor is the darkening of a shade a sign of purity. Except, V'nasis keyam nikrum beitza, unless it goes fully darker. Sorry, what over here? Fully dark. Fully dark means it went lower than even egg membrane white. Then, shari nasis boihak, it becomes a boihak, just a pigmentation, ulefikach Torah, and therefore it's pure. Now, in light of what the Rambam just said, he has to examine a verse. In Cain, if it's true what I'm saying, that simple darkening is not a sign of purity. Only if it becomes fully dark. Mahu zeh shenemar b'Torah. What is the meaning in the verse of the Torah where it says that the Kohen examines him after the second week of quarantine? V'hinei keho hanega, Torah says the Kohen sees, behold, the lesion has darkened. V'loi pasa hanega ba'er, and the nega didn't spread. Then v'tiharei hakohen, then the Kohen sends him free. Sounds like darkening is a sign of purity. Says the Rambam, sheim koha me'arba maros toher. It means if it got fully dark. If it got fully dark from all four levels, then it's pure. But the truth is, v'cheinim loy keha v'loy pasa, if it didn't get darker at all, it just didn't change, and it didn't spread, no white hairs or no healthy flesh was born in it, you're still pure. Going back to the chart over here. In other words, the Rambam is saying at this point, after the second week of quarantine, you look for everything. White hairs, healthy flesh spread. If none of those happen, you ask, did it get darker? If the answer is yes, darker meaning fully dark, then it's tar. But even if it didn't get darker, Torah is saying keya hanega is another way. But if it didn't get darker, if it just stayed fully in place, it's also pure. This is a matter of debate, by the way. According to Rashi, it's not true. According to Rashi, it has to get darker. If it didn't get darker, if it just stayed as is, the answers to all the questions are no, then actually he's impure, not pure. And it's the whole thing why that is, and what's the reason for the debate between them. The chapter ends here. I just want to do something unique that we don't usually do, just to go back to the Torah and actually see the verses that describe Tzaraas, so we can see everything that Rambam just told us. Literally going to read you the verses in Vayikra because it's pretty clear. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron saying, Adam ki yiyeh va'er b'sarei. If a person has on the skin of his flesh, se'es or sapachas or baheres, the lifted one, that's the like the wool type white, or the sapachas, the derivative of either one, or a baheres, the snow white. And it meets the criteria, it becomes a qualifying lesion. And you bring him to Aaron or to one of the sons, the Kohen. The Kohen needs to examine the nega on the skin. So if there is some hair that switched to white, that's the first siman tuma, the whiteness. And the appearance of the nega is deeper than the flesh. Nega tzarasu, that's it's a full-on lesion. It meets the colors and it has a siman tuma. The Kohen will see it, make him impure. If it's a white spot, and it's not deeper, and it didn't turn to white hair, then you close it, put it in quarantine for 7 days. Kohen checks him on the seventh day. The nega stayed the same, not spreading. Here the Torah intimates that spreading is a problem. It didn't spread. The Kohen will put him into quarantine again, second time. Here's the verse we just had. The Kohen will see him on the 7th day a second time. If the nega got darker, but according to the Rambam, even if it did, and it didn't spread, the Kohen makes it pure. It's just a pigmentation, and he'll wash his clothes and become pure. And the verse continues. If it does spread, even after the Kohen checked it, after he purified it, got to go back to the Kohen. The Kohen sees, it spread. Even though he was already sent home, he comes back, the Kohen makes him impure, makes it Tzaraas. Now, till here, the Torah is all talking about white hairs and spreading being a siman tuma. Never mentioned healthy skin. That is the next verse. Torah says, "Nega tzaraas kisiya ba'adam v'huva l'koyin." If the person has a lesion, brings it to the Kohen. V'ra koyin v'hinei se'es levana ba'er. The Kohen sees that there's a proper se'es coloring in the skin. V'hi haf chaser lavan, and it turned a white hair. Umichias basar chai bas es. And here Torah says, and also there's a healthy blotch. Now, we learn that both are not required. It's either a white hair or a healthy blotch of skin. Then Tzaraas neshenes hi ba'er b'sarei. That's a sign of Tzaraas. The healthy skin on top is not recovery. It's just revealing that under it is a proper tzaraas. The timoy akoyin, the kohen makes him impure. Lo yasgirenu ki tamehu. No need to even put him in quarantine because he's fully impure. Because the lavan, michya, and pisyain are all signs of impurity. So here you see a passage in the Torah where you examine and you see how the Rambam got all the rules from here. It's an amazing concept.